The jungle was alive with whispers. Cicadas screamed into the darkness. Leaves murmured under the weight of mist, and the moon glowed pale through the high canopy, casting ribbons of silver over the tangled earth. Staff Sergeant Cole Harlow lay motionless beneath the wet blanket of his ghillie suit, his heartbeat slow, his breath shallow. The scope of his rifle reflected the ghost of the moon, and in its glass, the world narrowed to a circle of discipline and control. He had been here for 40 hours, watching, listening, waiting for what everyone at command believed would never come. But he felt it, the tension in the air, the silence beneath the noise. Something was different tonight. The comms unit at his chest flickered, a faint static pulse breaking the stillness. Then a voice, sharp but trembling. "Specter, this is Watchtower. Confirm eyes on Delta Sector." Harlow's gloved finger pressed the receiver. "Affirmative," he murmured. His voice was low, a vibration more than sound. All quiet so far. He didn't mention the unease sitting in his gut. He learned long ago that instincts were worth more than reports. He adjusted his rifle slightly, the barrel wrapped in burlap and jungle vine. Through the scope, he tracked the stars. The constellation lines were wrong. One point of light shimmered unnaturally, growing brighter, redder, pulsing like a heartbeat. Then another, and another. His hand drifted toward the comm switch again. "Watchtower, I've had atmospheric entries, multiple. Bearing 172. High velocity, no transponder signatures." The reply was delayed, a lag too long for comfort. Then, "Copy, Specter. We're confirming. Wait. We're reading impacts across 4 sectors. Sit tight. Hold your post." Static swallowed the rest. The jungle went silent. Even the insects stopped. The first impact came like thunder. The ground heaved, trees snapped like bones, and a bloom of blue-white light ignited the sky beyond the ridge. A second blast followed, closer this time, the air shimmering with heat. Harlow's visor polarized instinctively, cutting through the glare. Through his scope, he saw them, sleek metallic pods embedded into the earth, steam hissing around them. Their surfaces rippled like living metal. One of the pods cracked open. A shape unfolded from within, tall and angular, its skin gleaming with bioluminescent veins. The creature moved with precision, too smooth, too deliberate. Its weapon glowed at the barrel like molten glass. Harlow watched, breath suspended. "Contact," he whispered into the dead comms. No answer. He counted 7 figures emerging, then 12. They spread into formation with eerie synchronicity. Not soldiers. Something else. Scouts. He'd read the briefings, classified speculations about extraterrestrial reconnaissance events. No confirmation. Until now. His finger found the trigger, but he didn't fire. Not yet. He studied their movement, the coordination. They weren't random. They were sweeping the jungle in patterns, scanning, searching. Then he saw it. A sphere hovering over them, a drone the size of football, rotating silently. Its light swept through the foliage, leaving trails of faint green data lines in the air. Harlow pressed himself deeper into the mud, covering his thermal signature with wet leaves and cold earth. The drone paused, scanning a nearby clearing. He exhaled through his nose, counting heartbeats. The beam drifted closer, brushing over the edge of his rifle barrel. For a moment, it hesitated. Then it passed. The drone floated onward. He waited 30 seconds, then another 30. Only then did he move. Slow, controlled. He shifted his position 5 meters to the left, crawling through vines and roots, his movements indistinguishable from the rhythm of the jungle. When he was stable again, he raised his rifle. The scope caught the faint shimmer of the drone's path as it returned toward the group. He centered the reticle just below the light source and exhaled. The rifle bucked gently, the silenced round whispering into the night. The drone imploded in a silent flash, its shell disintegrating before it hit the ground. The aliens froze, heads snapping toward the disturbance. Harlow's pulse slowed further. He chambered another round. One of them stepped forward, scanning the air with a 3-fingered hand. Its head tilted slightly, listening. Harlow's second shot punched through the side of its skull. The alien dropped, light leaking from the wound like spilled mercury. The jungle came alive again, not with nature, but with chaos. The aliens fanned out, weapons raised, firing bursts of plasma that burned through ferns and trees. The air turned acrid. The forest screamed. Harlow slid back into cover, rolling down an incline and landing behind a moss-covered root. He moved with instinct honed from decades of training. Strike, vanish, relocate. Never in the same place twice. He could smell the burnt ozone from their weapons, hear the faint clicking of their language through the static of their comms. Their voices weren't angry. They were clinical, coordinated, efficient. He adjusted his position again, climbing higher along slope. From there, he saw the full extent of their landing zone. 5 pods spread across a 300-meter radius, lights blinking like artificial constellations. Whatever they were doing here, it wasn't random destruction. They were establishing something. A perimeter, a beacon. Harlow raised his rifle again and scanned the tree line beyond them. The air shimmered faintly, a distortion like heat haze. Camouflage. More of them. He counted at least 24 shapes moving in synchronization. He whispered under his breath, not a prayer, but a statement of fact. Not tonight. His scope aligned with the lead figure. Another control breath. Another shot. The alien crumpled. Panic spread, visible even in their disciplined formations. They couldn't triangulate him. Their sensors were blind to his heat, deaf to his sound. One by one, they turned their weapons toward shadows. Plasma fire lit the forest, but Harlow was already gone, moving like smoke. Minutes bled together in a rhythm of kill, reposition, observe. By the time the plasma bolts ceased, only 3 aliens remained. The rest were down, silent, lifeless shapes scattered through the undergrowth. The remaining trio retreated toward a pod, carrying what seemed like a communication relay. Harlow watched as they activated it, a column of blue light shooting skyward through the canopy. He understood immediately. They weren't calling for reinforcements. They were marking this planet. He lined up the relay first, the reticle centered. He fired. The light shattered. Then he took the first alien, then the second. The third turned, aiming directly at him. Harlow squeezed off one last round. Silence followed. Smoke drifted through the clearing. His rifle barrel steamed from condensation. He stayed still, counting to 60 before moving. The comms crackled faintly. "Specter, this is Watchtower. Do you read? We lost all telemetry." He pressed the receiver. "Still here," he said. His voice was steady. "Contact confirmed. Hostiles neutralized, partial, multiple down. Copy that. Evac is..." The transmission cut again, interference washing over the signal. He exhaled slowly. Above him, the stars burned brighter, but one of them flickered oddly, an enormous vessel hidden behind the clouds. He knew then that this was only the first wave. He glanced down the barrel of his rifle, wiped the lens clean, and whispered to no one, "I own the night." The jungle whispered back, and the moon slid behind clouds. The hunt wasn't over. The jungle stank of ozone and death. Smoke hung low, curling through the trees like a ghost reluctant to leave. Harlow crouched beside the carcass of one of the aliens, studying the corpse with detached precision. Its exoskeletal armor was still warm, the strange bioluminescent veins pulsing faintly before dimming to black. Beneath the translucent plating, its muscles were bundles of fiber and light. The weapon it had carried was fused into its hand, almost organic. He tapped it with his knife. It vibrated softly, like something still alive. He stepped back. Whatever it was, it didn't belong in this world, and now it was bleeding into his soil. He scanned the area again, his instincts crawling. The air was too still. No birds, no insects. Only the slow drip of condensed water falling from leaves. He knew that quiet. It was the kind that meant he wasn't alone. He slid into the undergrowth, silent as mist, his ghillie suit blending into the moss and shadows. Every movement was a calculation, every pause deliberate. 100 meters to the east, faint movement, a flash of blue light, low and cautious. Another patrol. He'd expected that. They wouldn't leave their dead unaccounted for. He counted at least 8 silhouettes moving through the ferns, scanning with those glowing orbs they called eyes. Drones hovered above them, emitting faint hums as they combed the area with invisible beams. They'd learned from the first encounter. He needed to move before they triangulated. The first rule of survival: never be where they expect you. He crawled along a ridge, slow, unhurried. The earth was soft from rain, sucking at his elbows and knees. His heart beat slow, and even snipers didn't rush. They adapted. He reached higher ground and slid behind a fallen trunk. Through the scope, he tracked their advance. They were methodical, sweeping in lines, each step measured. He recognized that rhythm. It was military, just not human. For a moment, he admired the efficiency of their formation. Then he reminded himself admiration was a luxury. He watched one break formation, scanning toward his old position. He adjusted the scope a fraction and squeezed the trigger. The alien collapsed before the report reached its comrades. The others turned instantly, plasma bolts slicing through the trees where he'd been minutes ago. Bark exploded into embers. He smiled faintly. They were learning, but so was he. He began to circle wide, using the noise of their fire to mask his movement. A sniper's best ally was chaos. He made it his weapon. When he reached the far edge of the clearing, he paused beside a shallow stream. He dipped his hands in the water, then smeared mud across his face and gloves, dampening his thermal trace. He lay prone beside the stream, rifle poised. Through his scope, he watched the aliens regroup. Their voices were a series of mechanical clicks, rhythmic but agitated. For the first time, he sensed uncertainty among them. He took another shot. Another body fell. He shifted his position. Another. Within 5 minutes, the jungle had gone quiet again. The few remaining creatures vanished into the brush, retreating toward their pods. He exhaled slowly, adjusting the comm switch on his shoulder. Watchtower, this is Specter. Patrol eliminated. Confirm signal relay, over. Silence. Only static. He tried again. Nothing. The signal wasn't just weak, it was gone. They jammed it. He sat back against a tree, weighing his options. The mission protocol was simple. Hold observation, report movements, avoid engagement. That protocol was irrelevant now. He was cut off, surrounded, and the enemy was adapting. He needed information, and he needed it fast. He stripped the comms unit from one of the alien corpses, examining its crystalline surface. The design was incomprehensible, but it pulsed with faint energy. He tapped it with the butt of his knife. The surface rippled, displaying ghostly symbols in the air, lines of alien script shifting and rearranging. A holographic projection flickered, showing a grid of Earth's surface. Dots blinked across continents. Hundreds of them. It wasn't an invasion. It was an occupation. Harlow's jaw tightened. He closed the projection, pocketing the device. It wasn't enough to survive anymore. He needed to disrupt whatever they were doing. A faint metallic click sounded nearby. He froze. The noise repeated, measured, deliberate, not random. He lowered himself to the ground, crawling under a tangle of roots. Through the gaps, he saw movement, a figure smaller than the others, moving alone. The armor was different, sleeker, thinner. A scout. It carried a scanning tool that projected waves of light across the terrain. The light passed within inches of Harlow's face, but didn't register. His thermal masking held. When the scout turned, he moved. Quick, silent. One arm looped around the alien's neck. The other pressed his knife beneath its shin. The creature struggled, then stilled. Its eyes flickered once, twice, then dimmed. He eased it to the ground, retrieving the scanner. It was warm in his hands, humming softly. He pressed the side, and symbols rearranged into a faint holographic map of the jungle. His position glowed as a red dot. Around it, dozens of blue ones moved in steady patterns. They were closing in. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, streaking mud across his temple. "You're getting predictable," he muttered. He used the scanner to lead them into a trap. He placed sound beacons, small metal scraps rigged to echo gunfire, around the perimeter of a nearby ravine. Then he positioned himself on the opposite ridge. Minutes later, the aliens descended into the ravine, drawn by the false gunfire. Their sensors swept the wrong direction. He waited until they clustered, then fired into a fuel cell on one of their drones. The explosion rolled through the valley, tearing through the group in a burst of white flame. Leaves rained down like ash. When the smoke cleared, only 2 figures crawled from the wreckage. He didn't waste bullets. One fell to the forest floor without a sound. The other fired wildly, its plasma bolts cutting lines of fire through the brush before a single shot silenced it. Harlow watched the flames die. The night swallowed the light again, leaving only the faint glow of alien blood seeping into the soil. He leaned against a tree, exhaustion creeping into his limbs. His shoulder ached from the recoil. His fingers trembled slightly. He forced them still. There was no room for fatigue. Not yet. He thought briefly of home, of the dry Arizona air, the smell of sand and diesel from the base, the weight of silence before dawn. It felt like another life. Out here, he wasn't a man. He was a function, a necessity. He looked at the alien scanner again. The red dot pulsed brighter now, as though aware of him. For the first time, he wondered if they were learning more about him than he was about them. A low hum filled the air. He looked up. High above, something vast passed over the canopy, blotting out the moonlight. Its underside shimmered with thousands of lights. Too slow for an aircraft, too silent for a drone. It wasn't a ship. It was something else, something alive. He dropped into the mud, flattening his body. The air vibrated with low-frequency sound, like the rumble of a heart too large to belong to anything natural. The scanner blinked rapidly. The blue dots began moving faster. He didn't understand what they were doing until it was too late. The ground beneath him trembled, and from the earth itself rose metallic roots, spires of black metal twisting upward, pulsing with energy. The pods weren't just transports. They were seeding the ground. He watched, horrified but calculating. This was no longer reconnaissance. This was terraforming. He backed away slowly, keeping low, and spoke into his dead comms anyway. Watchtower, this is Specter. The enemy's building something. Coordinates following. Static. He lowered the mic, then, I'll do it myself. He looked at the scanner again, at the growing web of blue lights converging. The odds didn't matter. They never had. He shouldered his rifle, eyes narrowing toward the rising light. The jungle's shadows swallowed him whole. The hunt was about to begin again. The night pressed down like a living weight, thick with smoke and static. Harlow moved through it like a shadow stitched from the dark, every step a quiet assertion of control against the chaos building around him. The jungle no longer smelled of earth and rain. It reeked of metal and scorched foliage. The alien roots had spread, thin tendrils glimmering faintly as they burrowed deeper into the ground. He could hear them hum beneath his boots, alive with energy. Whatever they were growing, it was accelerating. He paused beside a stream, knelt, and let the cold water wash the grime from his hands. In the reflection, his face was almost unrecognizable, streaks of mud and soot framing eyes, too sharp, too hollow. He wondered how many hours it had been since the first drop pod fell. The sun hadn't risen once. The clouds above were dense, charged with the shimmer of alien interference. It could have been 6 hours. It could have been 60. Time meant nothing now. He rechecked his rifle, fingers moving with mechanical precision. The barrel was clean, the bolt smooth, the scope clear. Each movement steadied him. Routine was survival. But his thoughts kept circling back to the scanner he'd stolen. The red that representing him now pulsed faster, brighter, as if marking him for something unseen. He considered smashing it, but curiosity held him. If they were tracking him, then he could use it. The air vibrated, faint at first, then building, a rhythm like distant thunder. He dropped to a crouch and lifted his rifle. Through the scope, he saw figures moving between the trees, dozens of them. But these weren't scouts or patrols. They were soldiers. He could see the heavy plating on their limbs, the elongated rifles glowing with heat, and behind them, a towering form cloaked in distortion. A commander, maybe. He'd fought insurgents, warlords, and machines, but never something that radiated intelligence, so alien. They were hunting him now, not as prey, but as an obstacle to a race. He scanned for an advantage. The terrain was sloped with shallow valleys and ridges. He spotted a fallen tree across the ravine, its trunk hollowed by age. Perfect cover. He sprinted low, movements controlled, sliding into position just as the first volley of plasma burned through the air. The ground erupted behind him, splattering molten dirt. He steadied his breathing, lined up a shot, and fired. One alien dropped, its armor cracking open in a spray of light. Another turned toward the flash. Harlow shifted, fired again. 2 down, but there were too many. They spread in a crescent, pushing forward in silence. He felt the old rhythm return, the razor-edge focus that came when instinct replaced fear. His world contracted to the rifle, the crosshair, the breath before the trigger broke. Every shot was measured, deliberate, an act of defiance against inevitability. But the aliens weren't mindless. They adapted, using cover, coordinating through bursts of static and frequencies his headset couldn't block. He shifted positions, crawling up the ridge while reloading. The scanner at his belt blinked again. He pulled it out briefly. New dots appeared in the periphery. They were flanking him. He cursed under his breath and moved faster, angling toward higher ground. The canopy thinned here, revealing the sky, a shifting mass of gray cloud and pale light from the enormous vessel still hovering above. It looked like a wound in the heavens, leaking its poison into Earth's atmosphere. He found a narrow plateau, positioned a rifle, and opened fire. One by one, the flanking units fell, their bodies crashing into the underbrush. But with each kill, more light ignited below, fresh arrivals from the pods. He could feel the jungle dying beneath the invasion, the heat wilting leaves, the soil blackening. Something hissed behind him. He spun, knife in hand, and barely ducked as a plasma bolt shredded a tree trunk beside his head. A soldier had crept up the ridge, larger than the others, armor humming with power. Harlow lunged forward, slashing low. The blade struck a gap between plates, releasing a burst of luminous fluid. The alien swung back, catching Harlow's shoulder. Pain flared hot and sharp, but he didn't falter. He shoved the knife upward, driving it deep beneath the creature's jaw until the body convulsed and stilled. He staggered back, panting, his arms slick with blood. The wound burned, but the pain kept him awake. He tore a strip from his sleeve and bound it tight, teeth clenched. The scanner blinked again. Now it wasn't just tracking positions. It was transmitting. He realized too late what that meant. A distant roar split the air. From above, streaks of light descended, precise and devastating. Orbital bombardment. The aliens were purging the area, burning away everything. He dove for cover as the first blast hit, the shock wave hurling him against the ground. Heat seared his lungs. When the world steadied, he opened his eyes to find the jungle transformed into a wasteland of glowing ash. The roots still pulsed, deeper now, their light diffused through the charred soil. The bombardment hadn't destroyed them. It had fed them. He dragged himself upright, coughing through the smoke. His comm crackled weakly. "Specter, come and repeat." Evac window closing. He froze. "Watchtower, I read you. What's your position?" Static, then a strained voice. "Command gone dark. We're consolidating survivors near coastal sectors. If you're still out there, mark yourself for retrieval." He looked at the scanner. The red dot blinked like a beacon of death. "Negative," he said quietly. "Can't risk it. The signal draws them." A pause, then the voice softened. "You can't fight them alone, Sergeant." Harlow glanced around the smoking ruins. "I already am." The line died. He looked toward the roots again. They were converging now, the jungle floor splitting as a metallic bloom unfolded from the earth, petals of steel forming a structure, glowing from within. It was vast, pulsing with power. He aimed his scope at its core and saw what looked like a generator, shielded by a lattice of energy. He could end it here, or at least wound it. He adjusted his scope, compensating for heat distortion and wind. His finger found the trigger. He whispered to himself, "For Earth." The shot cracked through the silence. It hit the shield and rebounded in a flash of white light. The blast threw him backward, tearing his ears with the concussion. His vision swam, ringing, filling the void where sound should be. When it cleared, the structure still stood, untouched. He pushed himself up, dizzy, and saw movement in the haze. The towering figure he'd glimpsed before emerged, taller than the rest, armor rippling with liquid metal. Its eyes burned like twin suns. It stopped a few meters away, studying him. Then, in a voice like static shaped into words, it spoke. Human. Persistence unnecessary. Harlow lifted his rifle, blood dripping from his arm. Get used to it, he said, and fired. The bullet hit its chest and flattened uselessly. The alien didn't flinch. Instead, it raised one clawed hand. The air vibrated, and Harlow felt himself lifted off the ground, gravity twisting. He gasped, vision darkening. Then something in the distance exploded. The generator flared violently, struck from above. Human aircraft? Artillery? He couldn't tell. The alien staggered, dropping him. He hit the ground hard, rolled, and crawled behind debris. When he looked up again, the figure was gone, consumed by the flames. He coughed, tasting blood. Somewhere, far above, the sky cracked open with lightning. Reinforcements or destruction, it didn't matter. The battle wasn't over. He pressed a shaking hand to the scanner. The map flickered once, twice, and then a new signal appeared. Human, faint but alive. He smiled through the pain. Guess I'm not the only ghost left. He gathered his rifle, straightened his posture, and started walking toward the signal, each step cutting deeper into the glowing ruins. Behind him, the alien roots pulsed faster, feeding on the world. Ahead, something waited. He didn't know if it was salvation or another fight, but he went anyway, because the night still belonged to him. The storm began before dawn, though the sky never lightened. The clouds pulsed with a sickly blue glow, thunder rolling like the growl of some vast machine. Harlow trudged through the flooded jungle, his boots sinking into black mud that hissed faintly with heat. Every tree around him was dead or dying, their trunks wrapped in the metallic vines that had swallowed the forest. The scanner in his hand flickered, its display glitching between coordinates and static. Somewhere ahead, the faint human signal still blinked, a heartbeat in the chaos. He kept moving. Pain radiated from his shoulder where the alien had struck him. The wound had begun to throb with unnatural warmth. He ignored it. The air was poisoned now, heavy with the metallic tang of ozone. His mask's filters clicked with each breath. He was tired, more than tired, but fatigue had become just another sound in the noise of survival. The signal grew stronger as he climbed a ridge overlooking what used to be a river basin. Now it was a crater, vast and glowing. At its center rose the alien structure, no longer just a seed, but a tower. It reached into the clouds, pulsing rhythmically, sending waves of energy across the horizon. The jungle around it was gone, replaced by a landscape of glass and metal veins. And at the base of that impossible tower, small flashes of movement. Human movement. Harlow lowered himself into a prone position, raised his scope, and adjusted the magnification. 3 figures. One waved a flare, its red light a defiant ember against the alien glow. He recognized the movement pattern immediately, trained, deliberate. Soldiers. Survivors. He activated his comm again, though the static nearly drowned his voice. This is Specter to ground team. Confirm position. A crackle, then a voice, rough but alive. Specter? Holy hell, you're real. We thought everyone in Delta was gone. Not yet, he said. What's your situation? Cut off and running out of time. That tower's building something. We're trying to overload its core, but we can't get close enough to plant charges. Too much interference. Harlow watched the flickering arcs of energy crawling up the tower's surface. Then we changed the odds. He slid down the ridge, moving through the ashen undergrowth until he reached their position. The soldiers were gaunt, faces smeared with grime and exhaustion. One saluted weakly, disbelief written across his features. Sir, we thought you were. Don't finish that, Harlow interrupted, his tone calm but final. Show me what you've got. They led him to a makeshift camp hidden beneath a shattered boulder. Inside were salvaged explosives, broken rifles, and a portable transmitter running on the last of its power cells. The younger soldier, a corporal named Reyes, showed him a schematic on a cracked tablet. We managed to map part of the structure. The core's deep inside, shielded, but the energy conduits along the outer shell are vulnerable. If we overload them in sequence, it should trigger a chain reaction. How much time would that buy us? Harlow asked. Reyes hesitated. Minutes, maybe. But if it goes right, the explosion will take the core with it. And if it doesn't, then we die fast. Harlow nodded once. Good enough. He studied the schematic, memorizing the layout. The plan was suicidal, but he'd stopped believing in survival hours ago. There was purpose here, and that was enough. You plant the charges along the west conduit. I'll take the eastern one. We detonate simultaneously on my mark. Reyes frowned. You'll never make it out in time. Not planning to. The corporal started to argue, but Harlow's look silenced him. Do your job, soldier, he said softly. They moved out under the storm. The rain came down in sheets, sizzling as it struck the alien metal. The tower's hum grew louder with every step, vibrating through the ground and into their bones. The air shimmered with distortion. The closer they got, the more gravity itself seemed to bend. Harlow crawled beneath one of the conduit arches, the heat radiating off it intense enough to blister skin. He set the charges carefully, each click echoing in the storm. His hands were steady. Around him, the earth pulsed like a heartbeat. Through his earpiece came Reyes's voice. Charges planted on our end. Awaiting your signal. Harlow finished arming the final detonator. Stand by. A flash of movement caught his eye, silver shapes emerging from the haze. Drones, dozens of them, descending like a swarm. Their eyes glowed with cold light, scanning for intruders. He dropped to one knee and took aim. The first shot shattered a drone midair, the second pierced another's core. Plasma bolts rained down, searing through the mud. He rolled aside, reloaded, and kept firing. The rifle was an extension of his will, each pull of the trigger a refusal to yield. Specter, they're closing in, Reyes shouted. I see them. Get ready to blow it on my command. A bolt grazed his arm, spinning him backward. He hit the ground hard, his rifle sliding from his grip. Pain roared through him, but he crawled forward, dragging himself toward the detonator. The drones swarmed closer, their light merging into a single blinding glow. He reached the device, pressed his thumb to the trigger pad, and whispered, now. The world erupted. The shock wave tore through the basin, hurling debris and flame into the sky. The tower shuddered, its light fracturing into 1,000 shards. Harlow was thrown into the mud, vision blurred, ears ringing. When he forced himself upright, the tower was collapsing in on itself, the conduits glowing red-hot as the chain reaction rippled upward. Reyes's voice came faintly through the static. We did it. Specter, it's... The transmission cut. The explosion reached the core, and a blinding sphere of light consumed the horizon. Harlow dropped, covering his head as the ground convulsed. Then silence. When he lifted his head again, the tower was gone. Only a crater remained, glowing faintly under the storm. The metallic vines were ash. The humming had stopped. He stood slowly, every muscle screaming. The rain fell cold now, real rain, washing the soot from his face. For the first time in what felt like forever, the air smelled clean. He looked for the others. The camp was gone, buried beneath debris. No movement, no voices, just the wind and the hiss of cooling metal. He should have felt victorious, but there was no triumph here, only quiet and the weight of what it cost. He slung his rifle over his shoulder and began to walk. Each step echoed in the empty basin. Above, the clouds began to thin, revealing a sliver of dawn. The light was weak, but it was enough. His comm crackled faintly. Specter, this is Watchtower Command. Do you copy? He froze, unsure if it was real. Specter, we're receiving data from your location. The signal interference is clearing. You did it. He smiled faintly, voice rasping. Didn't do it alone. Extraction en route. Hold position. He glanced around the ruined landscape, at the steam rising from the shattered ground. Negative, he said. There's still something out here. You'll need coordinates. Sergeant, we can't risk. Not asking. He switched off the comm. He climbed the far ridge overlooking the crater, the first rays of sunlight glinting off his rifle. Behind him, Earth breathed again. Ahead, the sky still shimmered faintly with alien movement, retreating ships or reinforcements. It didn't matter. He knelt, sighted through his scope at the fading stars, and murmured, "You came for our world at night." He chambered round, steady and unyielding. "But the night belongs to me." The breeze stirred his ghillie cloak as he vanished into the lightning jungle, one last ghost in a world reborn.